Hello and welcome to another edition of Meet the Manager. Here we chat to a fantasy Premier League manager with a stellar record of success. We'll find out their strategies for a top finish and find out their plans for the remainder of the season. To timestamp this episode, we are recording after blank Gameweek 29 and ahead of Gameweek 30 in the 2021 season. It's a challenging season, put it mildly. My name is Joe and today I'm joined by Tom Stephenson, who is also known as FPL_Badgers9 on Twitter. He is also second in our all-time Hall of Fame. Tom, welcome. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me on today. Really, I think enjoying the little bit of rest time after the frantic few weeks that we've had, obviously into international break now. So it's nice to watch a bit of football and not have to worry about which players are scoring points.
Yes, it's been a difficult season for many. I'm not having the best of seasons, but you're having quite a good season. And well, let's put your career up, and that's not really a surprise. You're in the top 5,000 at the moment, but you are no stranger to that. This is your 14th season, and you're currently in the top 5,000, and you have 4 top 5k finishes already, one more in the top 10k. And last season, you ended 375, so that's a career best. But by your first season playing, you have never finished outside the top 40k. So it's both remarkable and consistent, and remarkable consistency. You must be doing something each season, because I've had good seasons, I've had bad seasons, but I've never seen a track record like yours. Everyone we've usually had on Meet the Managers had at least one season where it hasn't gone right. Barring your first season, so since 2008, it seems to have always gone right. So are there any just key things that you're doing to maintain that consistency?
I guess sometimes it's hard to know exactly, but definitely there's things I think learned over the years. In particular, I think the last few years you can see my ranks kind of gone up a little bit, so it's a bit better than prior seasons. I think the main reason for that would be having a focus on not taking too many hits. Okay. So definitely in the past, I would probably take 20, 25 hits in a season. You know, that's a good 80, 100 points. And definitely the last few years, I've really tried to cut back on those. I think last year I took 6 hits. This year I'm currently on 7 hits, which isn't too bad given all the problems that we faced and all the uncertainty. So yeah, that's definitely an area that I've tried to address, because I was kind of aware that taking so many hits was really a bit of a penalty to everyone who wasn't doing that. And so yeah, I think you can see that the ranks kind of steadily improved because of that. And the difference of 60, 70 points is really the difference between 50k and 5k. So okay. And I think sometimes I would almost in the past get into a habit of making hits, and now I start the season with that kind of intention right from the start that I'm going to try and ideally make 5 hits, something like that. So it at least works into my planning.
So how do you this is the key question. How do you avoid taking hits? Presumably, from the outset, you're planning ahead, so you don't need to take hits because you can easily get in a 1 transfer, 2 transfers, any player you want as you keep going. Is that the right way?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes. Other times, I literally am just trying to think carefully about whether I really need that player. Whether I really need to do it now. Sometimes it's easy to rush into decisions in FPL, and I found, just for me, the biggest challenge is staying patient. Okay. So in particular, if I think about it and I think, do I really need to do this? If I'm not sure, I try and do nothing, and that seems to have worked quite well for me.
In recent years, because from when you started to now, social media has become such a bigger thing. You're appearing on a video and a podcast now, and there is a wealth of excellent podcasts and videos out there. Lots of people with different views and with some really great information in there. But of course, on social media, there's that pressure starts to build, momentum starts to build about a player. So, for example, the week that's just gone by, the momentum was that some Brighton players might be good. West Ham players might have been good for that week.
Yeah.
And it was quite hard to resist that. How do you resist the lure of a player with that pressure? Or do you not feel that pressure?
I don't generally feel it too much, and what I try to do is I try to not just look at one source. If you listen to different pods, if you in the old days, I just scrolled down the Fantasy Football Scout forums and look at ideas that people had, and sometimes you'd agree with them, sometimes it maybe wouldn't work for your team, but in other occasions you'd be like, oh, that's a good idea. I'll have a think about that. So I think you just have to kind of not jump onto the nearest thing straight away and have a try and take in all that information, but at the end of the day you've got to make the call yourself.
Okay.
So yeah, I try and take in all this information and then make my own decision at the end of the day.
Because I find that's the difference. Because one of the themes of these Meet the Manager videos is to help people to become better managers, but to move into that sort of 5k top 1k sort of realm, and just get that difference. And that seems to be the key one, is the ability to cut out the noise and to cut out that influence and not be influenced by that as well. One thing I've noticed, but certainly in my seasons, a strong start helps. It's quite easy to maintain rank at this stage of the season. You just follow the crowd, and you can just keep rising up. When I'm having a bad start to the season, it's quite hard to climb. All your seasons, have you got a variety of good starts, bad starts?
Yeah, I think I've got a mixture, but I would say on the whole, I start probably pretty badly. I think the hardest time in the whole season is at the start. Obviously, you've got new players, you've got ones that have played abroad, you've got ones that have come up from the championship, changes in formation, changes in manager. There's a whole load of unknowns. And no season is the same. And until you start seeing how they're going to, how teams are going to set up, how players are going to be played, what their form's going to be like, there's a lot of different things that can impact them. And I normally take too many punts. The aim is always to try and take less punts, but it doesn't always work out like that. I always also say to myself, I'm going to leave 2 or 3 million in the bank at the start of the season, which I think is a good idea. I normally fail to do that as well, but I think in the seasons where I have started better, I have tried to be a bit more cautious, not try and do so many, not try and pick so many unknown players right at the start. And look, I can completely agree that if you get off on the wrong foot, it's difficult to turn it around. So, for example, this season I wildcarded game week 3. I made the decision pretty early that I'd made a lot of mistakes. And while I say I'm quite patient, equally, if I feel that something's really gone wrong, I try to act as soon as I can. So in this case, I really felt I didn't have Bruno, I didn't have DCL. These were players that I thought I need for the long term. Bruno, pretty immediately to me, who's a season keeper. And so I decided, look, I need to do something here, and just having the one transfer a week, even if I take the odd hit at the start of the season, where even though I said don't take hits, at the start of the season is the time when I would do so, because there's 8 million people playing. Players go up and down very quickly. So for me, just how I play, if I'm gonna take a hit, it's going to be early on, and if I feel that things are going badly wrong, that's when I try to act. And I have slight regrets as well, because that wild card obviously wasn't then available for when we come up to the international break. But at the end of the day, it helped me to get to a position where I had De Bruyne, Salah, Bruno, Son, Grealish, a power kind of 5 midfield, and I felt I was ahead of the game at that point.
Do you feel with this season, I mean, you mentioned, some seasons can have a theme. Sometimes, for example, when in Leicester's title-winning season, the theme was you can get 10, 12 million worth of player in a 5 million player like Mahrez. And in other seasons, you've got to spend big in order to do well, because the good consistent players just are more expensive. What themes do you think have come across in this season? I mean, COVID aside, but just in terms of teams and players, what general themes have come across?
I think the usual suspects generally have been similar to the prior years. So Bruno, we didn't really know, was he going to follow on from what he did in the second half of last season? He basically has done. KDB, he's just very consistent. That's, it doesn't feel like there's much of a change there. Salah is probably the one who's maybe dropped off. He was good in the first half, the second half less so. Obviously, the whole, you know, things that happened at Liverpool with all the injuries, I think has just hit the whole team in terms of, the momentum and the confidence. But I would say this season as well, I think there have been a lot of bargains. You look at, and look, I got on some of these way too late. You look at Bamford, absolute bargain at 5.5 to begin the season with. Other players like Antonio, I was on him as soon as he came back from injury. He is not a 6.5 whatever player. He is an 8 or 9 million value player, really. He's very consistent as well. And even in midfield, you can look at the Lingards now. You can look at Rafinha. There's been a lot of bargains out there. So, but interestingly, in defence, I think we all thought at the start of the season we'll all be on Trent at 7.5 million. What a bargain! And what a horrendous time we all had. If we, I'm sure we all had him, and we all stuck with him for certain amounts of time. And maybe some of us flipped to Robertson, and it was okay. But generally, those expensive defenders have not worked this year. So
it's a question of spotting that trend quickly and acting on it. And as you said, that game week 3 wildcards was key to putting the foundations for hopefully another successful finish to the campaign. What about general attitudes to transfers? When do you usually take a transfer? Is it Friday night, Saturday morning, or do you just steam in on a Monday or after a match?
I guess I know what I should do, but I don't always do it, and it does depend where we are in the season. So, like I said early on, I do try and build my value. I've always done that each season, and maybe this season it's probably not going to come in too helpful at the end, but in other seasons I think it has done. So early on, I am willing to take the odds risk. I try not to make transfers before they've played again. If they've got a midweek game, then I think that's a big no-no. Obviously you don't want to make a transfer and have the guy injured. But if literally it's Tuesday night and I look at the price rises and price falls a lot early in the season, and if I can see someone's going up that I feel I need in order to make something work, a little plan that I've got going in order to get some players that I feel are quite essential, then I'll sometimes take hits and sometimes take the earlier transfer. Later in the season, I think there's a lot less need to do that. Later in the season, like right now, I'm just trying to ignore everything. I know that some of the players I want might go up 0.1. In the big scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. There'll be other players I can pick.
And just with captaincy, we've just come off the back of a game week where the theme has emerged like, oh, it's fine, just take a punt every week. They're all going to come, Trossard at Brighton is always going to get a double-digit haul. And of course, sometimes that doesn't happen. But how do you pick your captains? Do you stick to your Salahs, your Fernandezes, or do you go for perhaps Calvert-Lewin, perhaps Gundogan? Do you spread it around a bit, or do you have your tried and tested?
Yeah, so in the past, I probably wouldn't think about my captaincy that much. It would be a last minute thing. Now I try to think about that more. I try to actually plan, in the next 4 or 5 game weeks at least. And in particular, I now try to stick to premiums. I think there's a reason that you pay 11 to 12 million for these players. It's not because of the points per million. They're not actually the best value in the game. The reason is mainly for captaincy and for keeping a consistent team. And so, now I really try to stick to premiums. In prior years, I'd be there captaining Callum Wilson because he's playing, Newcastle. And sometimes it works and you remember those times and they're always nice. But actually, I find that I've had more fails than successes doing that. So now I try to pick the big guns.
Well, your career history would indicate that's a successful strategy because you had so many strong finishes to the campaigns, and so sticking with the premiums there has obviously helped. Just finally, before we move on to your game week 30 team as a sort of a snapshot of your decisions, and also you've also kindly provided your game week 31 wildcard draft as well, so we'll come to that shortly. But I just wondered, this season and last have been different because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Matches are suddenly getting postponed, and particularly over winter, players were suddenly out of action for at least 2 weeks, maybe a month, maybe even longer. We've had a lot to deal with, a lot of fixtures being moved around. Have you? I mean, even though you had such a strong finish last time and you're doing well this season, how have you coped with that change, or has it been any different? Is it just like having lots of snow?
Yeah, I mean, just from my own viewpoint, I think it is a bit of a challenge just having all the games spread out. You feel like you almost have to watch everything. It was quite nice on a Saturday having 4 or 5 games at one time, having a flurry of points. So I try to not watch everything. I don't think, for most of us, that's probably not possible. I try to pick my games. Then I might listen to pods, listen to some of the, look at some of the stats, listen to what some people are saying on Twitter, to kind of pull the information on areas that I haven't seen. But in terms of the actual strategy of dealing, with all of this, I think I've tried to be more adaptable. I think I've tried to keep a bit deeper bench than I usually would. Although funny enough, I looked back and saw that in terms of points on the bench, I think until about 3 or 4 game weeks ago, I hadn't had a double-digit number of points on my bench all season. So that's kind of a bit weird. But generally, I've tried to keep a deeper bench, even if at least have playing players. Before I'd probably have maybe 2 players that maybe weren't even playing and that were absolutely cheap as chips, just so I could put as much into my starting 11 as I possibly could. At least I've been trying to have your Soufals, your Dallases, that fairly cheap, but still they're going to play, and they're quite consistent.
Is that something you think? I mean, because we don't know. That's the what's happening at the moment with the pandemic. We don't know how the next season is going to transpire. So, do you feel that that's something you're going to carry into next year? I mean, instead of your 4.9, your 4.0 defenders, you're going to be just spend that tiny bit more on your bench.
Yeah, I mean, I found it a little bit easier to manage, to be honest, and then I think you've got a few more options on rotation as well.
I must admit, I've fallen foul of that this year. I've maybe had 2 playable defenders on my bench instead of having a third player, and it's been difficult some weeks, especially when you've got these sudden postponements. Trying to manoeuvre around the blanks and the double game weeks. Let's move on to your game week 30 side, because this gives a snapshot of sort of where you're at in the season so far, and also your decisions here. And I can already see that some of the things that we've been talking about are at play here. So just for the benefit of those listening on the podcast, you've got Meslier in goal, Dallas, Soufal, and then Diaz, and then Rafinha, Son, Bale, Fernandes, Calvert-Lewin. Kane is your captain, which is what you talk about relying on premiums. Antonio, and what you're talking about having a strong bench. You've got Martinez in goal as your sub goalie. Gundogan, Target, and Dunk, all reasonable. Only Dunk. In fact, out of all of that, it's only really Dunk who's got a poor fixture out of 14 players, which I know a lot of us have at the moment. But looking at that, did you feel that this side is sort of indicative of your typical game week side?
Probably to some extent. I don't think I'd be probably planning to bench Gundogan in the past too much. Obviously, I've got a little bit of a headache there. Do I play Gundogan? Do I play Bale? I've been playing Martinez for most of the season, so Meslier has been a bit of a problem for me. It's been preventing me having either Rafinha or Bamford at different points. So I'm kind of happy that he's going to go. But it's probably a bit deeper than what I've had for most of the season, to be honest, the bench. I wouldn't really, I think normally I would at least have a downgrade on a few of those players. And as an example here, Dunk is probably going to move to a Chelsea defender. One of, there's 3 possible options really. Alonso being the real interesting one for a 1-week punt.
So this bench be even deeper.
Yeah, so I think Diaz or Soufal are going to come out for probably a Chelsea defender, and then I have to, I'll probably go in with like one of the Villa players, either Martinez or Target, possibly instead of maybe Soufal or Diaz as well. So a little bit to think about still, but I almost think here there's almost too many benching dilemmas. I don't like it when you've got that much to worry about. You end up, like I say, I haven't had many points on my bench across the season, so yeah, generally, I don't have such a hard task as this.
Okay, well let's move on to your game week 31 wildcard team. So just before we do that, the state of play with chips at the moment, have they all gone apart from the wildcard? Have you got any others left?
Yeah,
Yeah.
left with the wild card
So
now.
this is it. This is the big one for you. Okay, so I'll put this up. So bearing in mind, we just finished game week 29, haven't even had game week 30 yet. So this is gonna change, we presume.
Yeah, yeah,
But this is so far what we've got here. So you got Schmeichel in goal, Forster, who is playing at the moment for Southampton as a goalkeeper, 4 million. Alexander Arnold, Rudiger, Cody, Diaz, Shaw, Gundogan, Fernandez, Salah, Neto, Rafinha, Iheanacho, Kane, and Vardy. That's a strong 15, and there's a lot to unpack there with the remaining fixtures to go. So, do you want who? Well, let's start off with who are the ones that you think are just going to be nailed on, and then we'll come to the ones that you think might change. So, who out of this lot is your 99.9%? They're going to just be in your 31 wildcard team.
yeah. So I think I'll probably stick with Kane. You know what you get with him, very consistent, gives me a good base. Bruno is going nowhere all season. He's definitely in. I definitely will. I think I've come to the conclusion that I need to keep Rafinha. I mean, his stats are unbelievable. I looked at some of the stats: 24 chances created, 18 shots. This is in the last 6. 2 goals, 1 assist. Expected goal involvement of over 4 for 5.7 million. Really, really good stats. And I appreciate he's got a few difficult games coming up in the next 3. But then he ends the season really well, and that's why I put Neto in, because Neto has a lovely run, and I think I can probably flip those 2 around without having to make transfers. Other ones I'm pretty set on. Trent in defence. Liverpool's run is fantastic coming up. So, and he has also been posting some good stats. I think he, in the last 6, 14 chances created, 9 shots, expected goal involvement of 2.5. He's had no returns. Basically, the Liverpool forwards haven't been finishing the chances recently. I think I saw a stat that their chance conversion is something like 3% from all their shots. It's really quite incredible. But this fixture run should be what they need to turn that around, and that's what I think I'll bet on. Probably also with Salah in midfield. I have a little bit of a dilemma, I guess, whether I go with Salah or KDB. I'd like to go both. I could do that, but I end up with a very weak bench, and that's not really practical with game week 33.
Something. I mean, I before we came on now, a couple of days ago, I forwarded over sort of my hastily put together draft as well. And one option I was considering, instead of Gundogan having KDB, and instead of Salah having Jota, and that would go and fit with your budget, and it would arguably keep it still strong. Is that an option to consider?
It's definitely an option. I guess I feel there's a little bit more uncertainty there. I feel that Jota is maybe a little bit more of a rotation risk than Salah would be. And I think Gundogan and KDB are probably similar. And, I think I'm a little bit resentful about having to pay 12 million and not know whether a player who I'd probably captain as well and not know whether they're going to start. So just as an example, the Leeds game coming up soon for Man City that you'd probably want to captain KDB, they've got Dortmund either side. So straight away, I'm like, I don't think he's going to play that game. I really don't. Or 30 minutes maybe maximum.
Yeah.
So, and then he hasn't got a game in 33 at all. So at least for the next 3 or 4, I'm kind of thinking, well, there's maybe a bit too much rotation risk there than what I would like. And with Salah, with the great fixtures, they're still creating chances. The stats are still okay, even though they haven't been finishing them. At some point, they're gonna start to finish them, and well, you hope so anyway. So I think I'm a little bit more in favour of going for the Salah Gundogan option. Although I have to say, Gundogan could go for somebody else. Gundogan could go for Jota. He could go for Lingard. There's a few other options there because he's at a quite nice price point, obviously, and he definitely is playing deeper now. There's no doubt that before he was almost like the main man to get in the box and finish the chances. Now I think he'll still do that to some extent, but now the main man is KDB, and so I think his bonus score is probably going to be a bit lower. and he's probably going to not make as many runs as he did before. So there's a bit of concern about him. So I would possibly think about changing him up as well.
I can see why Iheanacho and Vardy are there. They're on form at the moment, and
Yeah,
looking at the ticker as well, they're doing very well there. They've got
yeah,
a whole bunch of great games coming up. Uh, West Brom, Crystal Palace, Southampton, Newcastle within 32 and
yeah,
35. It then gets a bit mixed towards the end.
yeah.
So I can see why for a 31 team you would have them both in. But are they there? But you also have the turn in Leicester's fixtures in mind when it gets
Yeah.
tougher.
Yeah, so their fixtures are really good from 32 to 35. Like you say, it then gets far worse the last three. But you've got two pretty much ready-made replacements in Antonio and Bamford just to go in. If you look at their fixtures for the last three, they're superb. So the only slight doubt I have here is whether I maybe downgrade Vardy to an Antonio earlier, because Antonio's stats are superb anyway. He's very consistent. So even though Leicester's fixtures are great, do I want to double up? Little bit unsure on that. I think Iheanacho is a real bargain, but I could just stick with Antonio. It would lead to probably one less transfer necessary further down the line, and then it would free up about 3 or 4 million. I could, look to maybe instead of doing a Rudiger, do a Azpilicueta, a bit more, certain there for a bit more nailed to start. And that would maybe help me move Gundogan to a Jota or something like that. But that's just something that I still need to decide on. But yeah, both Vardy and Antonio have great fixtures, and I'd look to bring Bamford in. I think now that I wouldn't have my Meslier problem anymore, then Meslier and Dallas would have gone. So it would enable me to bring Bamford in.
There's two reasons I like this. One is that your team is broadly similar to my wildcard team, although I have got West Ham in at the moment from the off, but I am considering that Leicester attacking double up. But the other thing that pleases me is because it takes us full circle to what we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, where you're talking about planning ahead and avoiding taking hits. So already you're putting in place measures to avoid the need to taking a hit, thinking of players that you might want. And so let's have a look at those fixtures for that period that we're talking about. So this is from game week 30 onwards up to 38. And it's sorted by fixture difficulty. So we've got Liverpool at the top. This is why you've got a double Liverpool and why you're keen on Salah. Wolves, this is why you've got Wolves in there. And then if you look down again, looking at Leeds, and then this is interesting why you've got Rafinha in. So Rafinha wasn't actually a player I'd considered putting in my wild card. But you're starting to persuade me otherwise quite effectively here, because once again this shows why perhaps you're quite more of a consistent manager, because you're not just looking at, I've looked at 31 to 33 City, Liverpool, Manchester United, and I thought I don't want to play Rafinha then. But then you look at game week 34 for Leeds, Brighton, Tottenham, Burnley, Southampton and West Brom, and particularly that Burnley, Southampton, West Brom at the end, and I think actually I do want to play Rafinha then. So he would be a handy player to put on your bench for Neto, which is what you've done. It all makes sense.
Yeah.
All makes sense there. Looking also at the fixtures as well, so you've got Brighton low down there, Fulham, and City's fixtures not great as well. Bit of a mix, and also they're going to be targeting Champions League. You see why you've got no Palace there, terrible fixtures, terrible form, and Tottenham you've only got Kane in there. West Brom you're not interested in, and Leicester you're looking at that mixture of fixtures, bad, really good, bad again, and then you can move on to West Ham, who coincidentally, I'm trying to find West Ham in the ticker, very high up, and towards the end, there we go. Leicester's final three fixtures, diabolical, and Leeds' final three fixtures, fantastic. So, and same with West Ham as well. So you've got options there, and other people have options. So say they might want to go for Bamford, for example, but certainly Antonio and Lingard. All makes sense, which I like that, because it makes the whole episode flow in a nice circle there, coming back to that main point. Let's have a look at some of these form players as well, so might explain why you've considered some of them as well. So we've got this up on the screen here. This is a last four matches the form players sorted by expected goal involvement. So we've got Kane at the top, then Iheanacho, Lacazette. Arsenal's fixtures are quite good. Antonio, Jesus, Pepe, Ashley Barnes, Lingard, Bale, Vardy and De Bruyne. So lots of familiar names there. One of the questions I want to ask about this, and one of the reasons I put this up, is your attitude to stats. Are you an expected stats man? Do you go for the traditional stats, or do you not bother with stats at all?
A bit of a mixture. I like to watch the games. Obviously, though, you can't watch everything. So I think the stats tell you a story. They highlight things that maybe you didn't notice within a game, or like I say, you haven't managed to watch it. And so they put I think I use them to kind of point me in the right direction, make me think about players, and then I might try to watch them a bit more carefully to feel, to get a feel for them and think whether they meet the eye test as well. So, expected goals, there's a lot of variables involved. But I think if you look at, chances created, shots, touches in the box, if you look at the kind of, multiple, different stats, then you get a kind of idea of especially with, I think, the more attacking players, of how involved they are and how likely they are to score points. It's obviously a little bit harder with the defenders, where you're probably looking a bit more at the team stats. But we've mentioned already, Trent, great stats recently. He wasn't performing particularly well earlier in the season, but recently he has been creating a lot of chances. Luke Shaw, we've seen last 6-8 games. I mean, his stats have been up there with some of the midfielders and forwards. I mean, he's been creating a whole load of good chances. And up till maybe about 4 or 5 games ago, they just weren't getting converted. So if you'd have got on him early due to the stats, I think you'd have had big upside in the last kind of 3 or 4 games.
So, I mean, that is interesting, because I remember when I was looking at a team right at the beginning of the season, and I think I was on a video, and I sort of, with Andy, and I sort of joked about Luke Shaw. Say, Luke Shaw's doing really well in this table, and I may even get him in. I really wish I had, because he's been exemplary. But it was an example there where real life emulates stats. And as we've seen with my team Brighton occasionally, they've been the XG champions all season, and suddenly they're actually putting some results together as well. So you've put your faith in the stats still.
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, I think it's still worth looking at the player and getting your own feel for it. But sometimes the stats are so overwhelming that there's no way that as an example, Bamford, he was having so many shots, and I didn't go for him early. I think I got him in about Gameweek 9, something like that. So he was already at 6.2. Some people were getting him in at 5.5. I guess as a bit of a punt, but the reality is that over 5, 6, 7 game weeks, he was taking so many shots. It almost didn't matter how good his finishing was. He was going to score some goals. And when a player is that cheap, then obviously it's great value as well.
Just before we go, is there anything else that you wanted to mention? Not just about the season ahead, but just about any particular strategies that we haven't spoken about, or any other sort of tips that you'd like to give to help managers get from wherever they are in the rankings to a much higher place?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered most of the things already, but I think the biggest thing is patience. That's the thing I try to think about, and if I'm not sure about a decision, then normally it's better to do nothing, and to hold off, maybe wait until the next week before you make your move. So I think that's my biggest recommendation. Apart from that, yes, concentrate on captains, try and build value, and don't take too many hits has worked for me. It maybe wouldn't work for other managers, but definitely for me it's worked okay. Great
advice. Tom, thanks so much for joining me. If you've enjoyed this episode, those listening or watching, please press like. Also remember to subscribe to Fantasy Football Scout to keep updated with all our latest videos and podcasts. Tom, once again, thanks so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure to speak to you finally, because you've been a name and now you're a face with that name on our Hall of Fame, and so it's Great to find you there. And we've got your Twitter address up there on the screen as well. That's at FPL_badgers9. And I'm sure people might like to follow you over the next few weeks or so as they look to climb up the rankings. Tom, thanks a lot for joining me.
Thanks, Joe.